my friend, and I hope you're doing amazing today. And as always, I thank you for spending part of your day with me. I felt inspired to make a video that's kind of out of the norm of my personal, maybe self help videos, you might call them, because I think the topic that came to my attention yesterday, a true crime topic, is something that's very important, particularly, I guess, in American society, because we're talking about our Constitution here, as it relates to the fairness of our trial system, our criminal justice system in general. Specifically, I'm referencing an article that was advanced by Amanda Knox and Christopher Robinson, an article that took issue with Nancy Grace's role as a victim advocate, a proponent for victims' rights, if you will. Before going into my opinion on all of this, I guess, let me give you a bit of a disclaimer. Maybe one that's not necessary, but just to make sure that some of you out there don't think that this is what I'm saying is out of personal bias. I don't know Amanda Knox. Our paths haven't crossed yet, and quite frankly, I know very little about her case. I know that she was exonerated by Italian courts for the crime of murder and does a lot of work for the wrongfully convicted. As for Nancy Grace, our paths have crossed once in person, and we've had about 5 or 6 other interactions. It's hard for me to recall. I've been on her show a few times. And based on those interactions, I believe her to be very passionate about what she does and to be a very kind and genuine person. Now, that being said, this disclaimer, like I say, might have been unnecessary because I don't see the conflict between these two women and the ideas they're advancing. I think they're not incompatible as I see it. I think that our justice system is served to some extent by both measures. You see, I'm a firm believer, and this probably won't come as a surprise to you, considering I worked as a criminal defense lawyer for so many years, that the Sixth Amendment, that amendment to the United States Constitution that guarantees all of us certain rights, a right to a fair trial, a right to zealous advocacy, a right to testify on our own behalf, and to force the government to prove our guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. All that stuff, and all the stuff that emanates from it that I could, I guess, lecture on for an hour. You see, that's a pretty solid American principle. And it's not one that says the victim of a crime has to suffer because of an American principle, right? It's not an attack or an affront on an alleged victim or a crime victim or their surviving family. It is zealous advocacy to make sure that the conviction that is imposed upon someone is just, is correct. Now, I know a lot of you in the court of public opinion might take issue with that, saying you shouldn't be allowed to say certain things, you shouldn't be allowed to do certain things. But that's not zealous advocacy. That's not an American principle. And it's a principle, again, that stands because that must stand because even as Amanda Knox pointed out in her article, there are people that are wrongly convicted of crimes. Now, does that serve the victim to have someone who did not commit a crime be convicted for the crime that was perpetrated against them or alleged to have been perpetrated against them? I don't think so. And I don't think zealous advocacy is an affront to anything, any of the victim's pain or any of that. It is simply upholding an American principle in a way that should not be taken as a personal affront. Likewise, caring about the victim, understanding their pain, and being sympathetic to that does not mean that you can't get a fair trial. One of the things I write in my book is defense attorneys don't support murder or any other criminal activity. Instead, they're there to protect the Sixth Amendment rights of their client. That doesn't mean that they don't care about the victim. They might not get to show that in the courtroom or even outside the courtroom because, a lot of laws, for example, Arizona prohibits the defense attorney from having contact with a victim or a victim's, surviving family member should they be deceased. Caring about the victim, part of caring about the victim to some extent too, in the courtroom is to make sure that that fair trial is taken. Even in Amanda Knox's article, she talks about, a wrongful conviction of someone. Think about how that woman felt. She identified this man as her rapist. Think about how she felt knowing that her testimony convicted the wrong person. Maybe zealous advocacy, DNA testing, all those sort of things would have prevented that, would have served the victim better for not having to have that additional pain and for having the right person convicted. Thus, as I see it, we need and have to some extent a criminal justice system that allows for zealous advocacy, but not at the expense, at least in no experience I've seen, at caring about the victim, about advocating for the victim, and about understanding and empathizing their pain. Our constitutional rights and empathy for those who suffer for having legal violations of the law perpetrated against them are not incompatible. The adversarial system in court may make it seem like it is, but that is by design to make sure that the victim does not lead to a conviction of an innocent person, and that when a conviction is done, that it's final, and the victim or victims, surviving family members, can move on with their life and begin to heal. All right, so that's my 2 cents. I'm sure I'll get some comments below. I look forward to reading them. Thank you for taking the time, and we'll see you next time.